Thank you everyone for joining us today. I am really excited to have Kate Marsh-Lord from Secure Families Initiative with us, and Kate Horrell, who in the military community is largely known as the financial guru for all things military pay related. We're going to give everybody just a few more seconds to jump on, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, it looks like we have 10 people online, so why don't we go ahead and get things started today. As many of you know, a government shutdown is quickly approaching, and we know that military families are unsure about what that means for them. What is the government shutdown? How does that have the potential to affect them? So we're really happy to have brought everybody together today to talk about that. I'm Austin Carrick. I'm the CEO of Exceptional Families of the Military, and we're a nonprofit organization that supports military families enrolled in EFMP. We have Dr. Jennifer Bittner, who's here with us. Jennifer, you want to tell them about yourself?
Sorry, yes, per usual, I was having issues unmuting myself. Anyway, hi, I'm Jennifer Bittner. I'm executive director and lead researcher, and always super awkward, I see, with my introductions as usual. And just kind of looking forward to have this unfortunate, serious chat with everyone today. But it's important that our military families know what to expect and can best prepare themselves. So, yeah.
Exciting. So Kate from SFI, do you want to go ahead and start with your introduction and tell us a little bit about what it is that SFI does?
Sure. First, thanks for putting this together and hosting it. I think it's really important. My name is Kate Marsh-Lord. I am an active duty Air Force spouse. My husband has been in for over 23 years, and we've been married, 19 of those. And I am the communications director at Secure Families Initiative. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit that works to empower a diverse group of military spouses and family members and loved ones to advocate on the issues that are important to us. And obviously, this is one of those issues. We also work really hard to get military affiliated folks to register to vote and to get out to the polls so we can elect leaders to avoid things like this.
Thank you so much, Kate. So we're going to pass it over to Kate Horrell. Kate, can you tell us a little bit about you and all of the many things that you have been doing for military families in this space?
Yes, I want to reiterate Kate's thanks for putting this together because there's so much misinformation out there. My name is Kate Horrell. I am a personal financial educator who's been working with military families for about 15 years. I write articles and curriculums and webinars, and I do presentations, and I really enjoy getting down to the nitty-gritty of why financial things happen to our military families, not just what's happening. So education is key to me, and this subject is an area that we all need a little more education. I will throw out there that I have to relearn how this happens every time it happens because it's very complicated. So anybody listening, don't feel bad if you don't understand because it's hard.
Thank you so much, Kate. I agree with you. It's really hard and it's complicated and we're all confused about a lot of things. So I'm going to pass it over to Kate from SFI to tell us about what the government shutdown means, when the shutdown is going to happen, and all of the other things that we should know that we probably don't know.
Thanks. And as you all have alluded to, there's a lot. So I'm going to try and cover sort of the basics of where we are now compared to previous shutdowns and some of the big picture items of what it means for military families. So very basically, what is a shutdown? It's when Congress basically does not pass a budget, so there's no financing available for the government to continue to operate. So as of right now, the fiscal year ends September 30th. That is tomorrow. So we are less than 36 hours from the government shutting down midnight, Saturday night, October 1st. So all federal agencies have to stop their functions, and only those that are just deemed essential will continue working. So as you'll probably hear the term furlough, that's a lot of civilian employees will be furloughed, so they won't go to work and they won't get paid. And then there are people who are deemed essential. Obviously, our military spouses and loved ones are essential, so they will continue to go to work even without a paycheck. And that's one of the things that makes this shutdown a little bit different from ones in the past, because obviously military is essential to national security. Military will continue to work and continue to operate. In the past, most military folks have been paid. In a shutdown I want to make sure I can say the years correctly. In a shutdown in 2013, military was paid because Congress passed a bill basically saying we guarantee military pay even in a shutdown. Folks have to work and they're essential. They should be paid. This Congress has not done that yet. There is no bill being voted on, scheduled for a vote, that will guarantee military pay. The more recent shutdown in 2019, active duty service members, other than the Coast Guard, because Coast Guard funding comes from the Department of Homeland Security. So in 2019, the Congress had managed to pass the Pentagon spending bill. So that is where military paychecks came from. They have not passed the spending bill yet this year. So they have not passed the spending bill, they have not passed a budget, and they have not done a separate bill guaranteeing pay for military folks. So that's where we stand now. Less than 36 hours from shutdown, military folks are not getting paid. Not ideal. Do you want me to go into some of the services, like some of the more specifics about services that won't be available, or we can get into that later, whatever you prefer?
No, why don't you go ahead and hit that? Because I think that's probably where we're going to go next, right? Okay, what does this mean, though, pragmatically in our everyday lives? So go ahead. I know we have a bunch of topics to cover on this. Unfortunately, it's a lot. But yeah.
First, it's worth really acknowledging and recognizing that every military family will probably feel the effects of the shutdown differently because of where you're stationed, or your proximity to base, or how much you really rely on those base and government services. So folks that are overseas will feel this probably a lot differently than folks like myself that live in Northern Virginia, where, I'll still have access to a lot of resources because we don't rely on a base for most of those things. For medical care, elective surgeries, elective procedures, routine appointments on DoD facilities will probably be canceled. Obviously, again, a lot of this is sort of the top line guidance. A lot of it is maybe, probably, might be. So it could be very specific to where you are or to your specific needs. So obviously check, but the big picture, basic guidance that we've received is that elective procedures and surgeries and appointments will be canceled. For DoDIA schools, they will remain open, the schools itself. So anyone who relies or attends DoDIA schools, thankfully, they will remain open. However, all extracurriculars like sports, clubs, homecoming dances, those things will be canceled. And I know that is a big quality of life issue for folks overseas. We've heard a lot from, mama bear military moms who are just really sad for their kids, for the things that they're going to miss out on. Morale, welfare, and recreation, MWR stuff. A lot of this really depends on where the specific funding comes from. NAF activity funding comes from a different pot of money, so that should not be impacted. But things that are funded by the government will be shut down. One of the more recent guidance we've seen about childcare centers is that most CDCs should remain open, but youth center programs will likely close. So either way, you might be in a childcare bind and without a paycheck, which is just clearly a really difficult position for a lot of families to be in. And other federal services like SNAP and WIC will stop on October 1st. So as we know, a disproportionate amount of military families face food insecurity and rely on these services. So we're at real risk of, military families having trouble putting food on the table. So in addition to sort of, the more quality of life issues, there's some real serious well-being issues here. And so I just encourage us to find the best information you can at your base and your resources that you rely on, and also look out for one another, because there's a lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstanding, and it's really, really stressful. So bottom line, just, let's look out for one another and share reliable information when we do get it.
Thank you so much, Kate. So I know, as an EFMP family, a lot of our concerns revolve more around those specialized needs, but I know that some of those needs we all have, right? So I know that I wanted to point out to all of our families that medication copays, you may not be on a medication every day, but when you go to the hospital, if you're in the ER and urgent care and your provider is going to prescribe you a medication, keep in mind that you could go to Express Scripts formulary tool, and you could see how much that copay is. And if the copay on that medication is a lot higher than what you have to pay in the moment, you can ask them to substitute it for a medication that has a much lower copay. We also know that oftentimes our copays can be more than the medication itself would be, and you can use a program like GoodRx and actually get that medication for less. So if you go on the GoodRx website, you can actually see how much that medication costs at different places around where you're at for that pharmacy. And I would encourage you to do that before you leave the hospital or the clinic, because as a mom who has had to call back to an urgent care and say that's not a covered medication, it takes a long time to get it. And you may think this isn't going to affect you, but you never know when that middle of the night appointment has to happen and your MTF pharmacy is going to be closed. Rebecca, I'm so sorry, Jennifer. Rebecca is another member of our team. Jennifer, do you want to address the Head Start impact that families may experience?
Sure. I've been, kind of looking around at like everybody else, trying to wondering like, what is this going to look like if this, the shutdown does occur? And I know a lot of our families, that are involved, maybe not only EFMP families, but military families in general. If your kid is an early intervention or something and they're in a Head Start program, will likely get shut down come Monday. So, ask your childcare centers, ask your programs and everything that, this could affect, and make sure that, unfortunately, now we have to scramble to get a backup plan with very little notice. And as we were talking about prior, it's very frustrating because anything you read up on the government shutdown, it's like, maybe this will happen, maybe this won't. It very likely could, but it very likely couldn't, which is just so helpful for us. And I mean, like, I get it. Like, military families, we can plan, pretty quickly when things kind of go awry. But I don't know. This is just very overwhelming. And this is coming from someone that, has 3 kids and an EFMP with all health problems, health issues and stuff. So yeah, check with your Head Start if your kid's enrolled in a Head Start. I don't know
Thank you, Jennifer.
Anything else to add to that?
I feel like this list is probably going to be getting longer as time goes on. It's going to pop into our head. Oh, we didn't talk about this. We didn't talk about that. So everybody feel free to jump in if you remember something. I'm about to toss it over to Kate Horrell to talk to us about resources. But as I'm doing this, I want to remind you all that you can drop your questions in the comments and we will try to get them answered for you right now. If we don't have the answers, somebody from one of our teams will be back in touch. Kate?
Thanks. I want to present a possibly encouraging viewpoint, if there is one. The good news is here that today is payday. Most military families got paid yesterday or the day before if their bank or credit union offers early deposit. So in terms of pay, we're not actually looking for a direct impact on military families, potentially for another 2 weeks. Now, I do want people to be thinking, this is a 2-week runway. I just got this gift of 2 weeks that I can be making changes to the way I spend my money now so that I am a little bit more prepared if I don't get paid in 2 weeks. While I say that, I want to throw out that let's say the government shutdown lasts 12 days. That paycheck in 2 weeks, even if the government reopens, may be delayed for a few days because it takes time to turn the process back on again. So things military families could do in the next 2 weeks, to make changes to their plans, right? Look at your situation. What are your finances really looking like? If this is something you don't normally do, this might be a little eye-opening. Look at your assets. What do you have in your bank accounts? If maybe a member of your family has a job that you could pick up some more hours, this is crazy to say, but right, go pick up that overtime, make some changes. Or if your next door neighbor sometimes asks you to babysit, maybe this is the weekend you really want to pick up a babysitting job. If pay comes on time, you can put that in your emergency fund and you'll be better prepared for when this happens again. Familiarize yourself with the resources that are available on your base. You may have access to food banks. Every branch of the military has a relief society, and they are going to be ready to step up if things happen. We're talking about WIC and SNAP. I will say that WIC is my biggest concern about this because there are, depending on what state your WIC benefits are issued from, you potentially could go try to use your WIC card on Sunday and it might be declined. Many states think that they have a day or two that they can actually float before they run out of money. SNAP benefits, they think, will continue. They think they have enough money to make it to the end of the month. So hopefully that the problem will be resolved before SNAP runs out of money. I also want to emphasize that because of the way that they are funded, military retirement should not be impacted. VA disability compensation should not be impacted. So there is some bright news in this very frustrating and confusing situation. But if, this is a great time for families to really dig deep and maybe do all those things they've been thinking about doing to cut their expenses, but they didn't really want to. Turn the thermostat down, eat out of your freezer. If you have any food in your freezer, focus on lower cost choices for your food, bringing in a little additional income.
Thanks, Kate. That is a lot of really great information. I think that, we've been talking about getting creative in my house. And one of the things we've talked about, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, we have like a garage full of stuff that we just put in there when we PCS because we can't find a home for it and we're not using it. So this is also a really great opportunity to have those yard sales you want to have, especially if you don't live on base. Let your neighbors compile all the stuff that you don't want to get charged for in your next PCS because you're overweight. And I know that some banks also, like our car company, allows us to push a payment for our car. And so I'm really grateful that I can reach out to them and say, I want to push it by a month. I mean, that does add the interest on the other side, but for this paycheck, I was able to say, I'm going to just push this car payment and then hope I get paid next paycheck. Are there other things like that in the past you've heard people doing for the government shutdowns? I know the Coast Guard went like 18 days without pay in the past. Do you hear of any other really creative ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. Always reach out to your creditors. They are, particularly depending on where you live or what institutions you're working with, they're going to have some sort of plan. Some military banks and credit unions may give you a short-term loan to cover a missing paycheck. If we roll into multiple missing paychecks, that may get to be a problem. But in terms of that October mid-month pay, that may be an option depending on who you bank with. But all creditors, whether it's a car loan, a personal loan, a mortgage payment, reach out to them. They don't want your situation to get bad. It doesn't help them. Also remember that the sky is not falling. Things are not going to show up on your credit report till they're 30 days late. You may have a late fee, but there's a good chance you may be able to get that waived if you're in communication with who that creditor is. Again, the relief societies will always have some sort of plans. Now they have limited funds, so they're not in a position to, necessarily cover your mortgage, although they might. Every relief society has some sort of very short-term, small loan that requires a very minimal application process. In the Navy Relief Society, it's called a quick assist loan. You should be in and out in 15 minutes and you can get $1,000. And that can cover your family's basic needs, right? It can put gasoline in the car. It can put food on the table until this situation gets resolved, because I suppose hypothetically there is a way this doesn't get resolved, but that's not going to happen.
So I guess that pushes us back over to Kate from SFI. Kate, we've been through this in the past where we were right up at the deadline and we thought this was going to happen. We thought this was going to happen. And then thank goodness it didn't. It sounds like we're hearing a lot coming out of the Capitol that's saying everybody thinks this is really going to happen. And we're hearing some people say they think this could last for quite a while. So can you speak to us about really, how that's happened in the past? We were at like the, pumpkin's about to change mark, and then the bill came through, and like, where should people be watching and all of those things that they should be keeping an eye out as the news continues to come down.
Sure. This one does feel a little bit different from some of the ones in the past because those were about very particular policy disagreements, right? Or a difficulty between the Senate and the House to come to an agreement. This one's a little different because it really is all sort of generated from the House side and really having a hard time putting forward a budget, even to then go to conference with the Senate to come. We're not even at that point yet, right? They haven't proposed a budget. The Senate is supposed to vote on one today. So to your point, it does feel a little dry because it just sort of seems like we're far away from even getting to a resolution. There is an option, obviously, which is sort of the thing that has saved us many times in the past from a shutdown, is a temporary continuing resolution, which is where they would say, okay, we vote to just keep the spending at the same rate that it has been for this fiscal year. So it would basically say, we'll kick this can down the road for 2 weeks, but keep the government open and keep it running the way that it has been for the last year. And like I said, that has sort of been the stopgap that has prevented some shutdowns previously. There's a group in the House that don't want to do that. They are really have a dead set on reducing the budget. So they don't want a continuing resolution. So that is sort of the place to watch. And as I mentioned, in previous shutdowns, there were some last minute efforts too to make sure troops were paid. There's at least a couple bills that have been introduced in the House and one that has been introduced in the Senate, but so far no votes have been scheduled on that. I believe it was in 2019, one of the recent ones, sorry for getting them confused. One of the recent ones, it was a very last minute, literally within 12 hours from like introduction, agreeing on the bill, and then it was passed very last minute. So we can keep our fingers crossed that maybe something like that will happen tomorrow, some sort of last day effort before the shutdown, or even after this shutdown begins, maybe they'll pass some sort of bill to pay us. And then if they do that before October 15th, it's possible that the next paycheck wouldn't even be delayed. So we can keep our fingers crossed on that. And if I may plug, one way to do that is to keep talking to our lawmakers, right? They are elected to go to Washington to represent us. They need to hear from us right now that this is going to impact real people, and we need to tell them our stories of how this is going to impact us. As recently as last week, a lawmaker said, people in the real world aren't worried about a shutdown. I'm not hearing anything from my constituents because they think it's just this DC bubble thing. So we have tools at SFI on our website, on our social media, that make it super easy to call or write your members of Congress, or do both, okay? It only takes a couple minutes. We have the script written out. We have the letter pre-written where you can just go and add your personal details, because the personal stories really matter. And they could move the needle where even if there's a shutdown, at least some of our most important benefits like pay won't be disrupted. Yeah.
So if I can pop in here, I do want to remind you guys to be kind to the people who are answering the phones. Remember that these are oftentimes college kids or kids in high school who are doing an internship, and yelling at them is not going to make the congressman or woman more likely to hear your story. So it's really hard to stay calm when literally we're talking about getting paid, but remember that kindness can go a long way in those conversations. Kate, did you have something else you wanted to add before I chimed in? Nope.
No,
okay.
I totally agree. Put a smile on your face, as difficult as it is while we're sharing our messages. But this is one of those you get more bees with honey situation. And our stories are really, we have very real impact stories. So let you, use your words, speak for, tell your story. It's the thing that might change someone's mind. And it will be recorded. And if we get enough phone calls, maybe we can make a difference here. So that's my plug to do a little bit of advocating today.
Thank you so much. So I know that someone dropped SFI's website in our comments. So if you're looking for that, go ahead and check out our comments. I want to pop back over to Kate Horrell. One of the things that we haven't addressed yet is commissaries and how they'll be affected. Can you tell us about that?
So a little bit, this goes back to, we think, we guess, we presume, commissaries have a little bit of funding in their pocketbooks, just like hopefully all of us have a little bit of funding in our pocketbooks that can get them through a little while. Once that funding runs out, commissaries that are at locations that can be, that they can justify that commissary is fulfilling an essential need for a military family will likely be able to stay open. However, your commissary at Fort Belvoir, when there's a Wegmans right down the road, is likely not going to be deemed essential, and it will probably be shuttered during the time. In the past, when this has happened, those commissaries have had fire sales getting rid of all of their perishable foods. So make sure that you're connected with your local community, maybe whether it's their Facebook page or whether you're involved in your family readiness group, so that you're aware of what's happening at your local installation. That's true for every aspect of this shutdown. You want to be tied into the information that's coming from the place that you live, because what's happening with Austin and Kate and Jennifer may not be happening to me.
Thank you so much. So we do have some comments coming in from the audience, and I'm hoping that you may have their answers. Somebody, Veronica, is asking, do we know if DFAS will also be closed?
Do you want to go, Kate?
I do not know. I'm going to do some quick looking at the resources that I have gathered.
So I will say that the DFAS's operations should shut down. Are there parts of DFAS that may remain open? Probably. There are probably some jobs there. But as I said, one of the problems if this extends too long is that the next pay day is supposed to be on the 13th, I think. Let me double check. And yeah, it's the 13th. If we pass a bill on the 12th, there's a very distinct possibility that pay is not going to come out on the 13th. There is typically a 7-day process for how long it takes from the time pay gets calculated to the actual payday. They can do that faster, but they can't do it instantaneously. And part of that is not only because the money doesn't exist for them to run the process, but it's also because the people who run the process aren't allowed to be at work.
Thank you so much, Kate. So we have another similar question to this. Does anybody know if leave will be affected?
I can answer what the answer was in a previous shutdown. Previously, all leave was rescinded, and this is because of a very complicated way that leave is paid for. Even though we don't think, we think of leave as being paid for. Yes, it's just paid leave, but there are a lot of mechanisms behind the scenes of how that money got accrued, and then how that money can get paid back out. So in the past, leave has absolutely been canceled. Will this happen this time? I suspect so, but I can't guarantee it.
Thank you. And I did want to share, we had a comment from the audience that said, I lost it, that they spoke with DFAS this morning, and the customer service agent shared that her team had not yet received detailed guidance on the shutdown response from DFAS leadership. So it sounds like they're hearing a lot of the same things we are, which is we're just not really sure.
And if I can be frank, I think that's the answer that a lot of agencies and a lot of people are giving right now, because they just don't know, which is incredibly frustrating, and it makes it harder for all of us to plan. It makes it harder for all of us to know what to expect. And I think there's been a real lack of information sharing from official guidance. And it's incredibly disappointing, right? Like, I understand they don't want to do a lot of work if there's a last minute resolution. So the more information that they share that's accurate, like legit information coming from the source, coming from the Department of the Air Force or whoever, I think the better. And it would help alleviate a lot of our concerns and a lot of this confusion. And also it would limit a lot of the misinformation, because people just, are trying to fill the vacuum. And I've been really discouraged by the lack of guidance, frankly. So
I agree with you, Kate. I was just thinking like, oh gosh, my train of thought, of course, has now left my mind. Oh, this always happens. No, but I think everybody is kind of hopeful that there will be a resolution before we absolutely have to like plan and execute any sort of contingency plans that we put in place for this shutdown. So, thanks to social media, especially the past couple of years, it's, definitely giving families more of an outlet, more information and all of that. I think people kind of forget that, when we want answers so that way we can come up with our contingency plans, like we need them almost immediately. Yeah, this may not happen, but if it does, I still need to prepare. And I think that's probably what's frustrating me the most on behalf of like myself and families, is that I can't properly prepare. I just got my daughter's inhalers filled just in case we might need them next month and things kind of fall apart or whatever. And I think that's probably where a lot of my frustration has been this past week, and people not understanding. They're just kind of like, just wait. And it's like, we can't wait. We can't do that.
I think part of that comes from a little shutdown fatigue. The community, we all feel it as individuals, right? And you've all seen the Facebook comments or heard from your friends, oh, this happens every time, but don't worry, the military will get paid. That happens on an institutional level as well. So organizations like the individual branches of the service and DFAS and the VA, they've been down this road so many times, and I would say that they used to be more proactive about putting out plans and making announcements. And I think that got tiring for them, because then the shutdown would never happen. And they got everybody all spooled up, and then it didn't turn out to be a thing. I do know from an operational standpoint that DFAS may have not have heard about this morning, but I would guess by about 3 or 4 o'clock this afternoon, because they need to start making official notifications to their employees about what the furlough process looks like. And, this involves bringing people into offices and sitting down with them and signing papers. So as the day unfolds, I think there is going to be, maybe not out to us, the consumer level, but within these organizations, there is definitely going to be a ramping up, particularly since it's happening over a weekend.
Thank you so much for adding that. We have another question. This one is about retirees. Do retirees on fixed income get paid, and are they able to access their health benefits if a shutdown happens?
I will go again. Because of the way military retirement pay is funded, it should not be impacted in any way, shape, or form. Again, those people got paid today. Military retirees are not going to get paid for another month. So this gives Congress a lot of time to organize things. Healthcare benefits should not be impacted, except for, as we discussed, things that would be considered more optional, but critical healthcare should not be impacted, whether that comes from the VA or whether that comes from TRICARE.
Thank you. And the follow-on to that, because you answered half of it, is will TRICARE or TRICARE Echo be affected? And if I can pop in the Echo piece, Kate, I think our families need to remember that they have an Echo copay. And so when you go to use that Echo service for the first time in the new month, it really comes down to whether your provider is billing you that at the end, or if you're going to have to pay that up front. So you may be able to get the benefit, but are you going to be able to afford the copay when it's time to get that benefit? That's a really important thing to take into account. I know a lot of us have diapers that are auto shipped, or they have a nurse that's coming to their home. remember to ask about how that's going to be handled, because I know some of our companies require a credit card from me up front and others say, oh, we'll bill you later. But that's going to be a very real question. I know in my home, when that first, who's going to be the first one to submit the claim and collect the copay for the month? Did you have more, Kate?
I think you've really covered that one pretty well. Yes, as we've said, TRICARE should be in effect, although it may be slightly modified.
Thank you. So I know we're not here to speak just about EFMP, but I think it's important to remind our EFMP families, we've talked a lot in the military community about food insecurity already. I think the latest numbers come out say that 1 in 4 military families faced food insecurity last year. And in our survey from last year, our families told us that they were having the same issues as everybody else when it comes to food insecurity, but that those issues also came from a direct result of their EFMP status. So we had one mom tell us, I had to choose between buying a gallon of milk or paying for a copay when it's time to go to therapy. And so as we're going into the shutdown, I really encourage you to think about, how much that gas is going to cost you to get to your appointment if you're still going, how much that parking garage fee is, because if you have to go to the ER, you're going to have to pay that garage parking fee if you're near a city that does that. I know here in DC, it feels like every private hospital charges you to park. I'm sure there's a couple that don't, but try to plan ahead, because those things I know from experience can be really hard when you're literally going, I know they need to go to the hospital, but I don't know how I'm going to get my car out of the parking garage. So please try to think ahead, try to put a little bit aside for those types of things. If you're struggling with finding food because you have celiac disease or a peanut allergy, and we know that that typically comes from a food bank, please reach out to us. I can't promise you that we're going to have a perfect answer, but we can definitely put out a call for help for families with those specific types of needs in those areas to try to get you what you need.
I want to put in a plug here again for the relief societies. Very specific needs like that are the relief societies' bread and butter. If you go to them and say, my child has therapy 3 times a week and I can't afford the parking, they're going to find a way to help you with this. If you say, my child can only eat these 7 things because they have MCAS and I can't afford these 7 things right now, this is something that the relief societies excel at. So please remember that they are there for you.
So before we let everyone go for the day, does anybody have anything they think we missed that we should address? And this is a last chance for everybody viewing to drop your questions. Okay, let's see. We have Nadine telling us that there is a food bank connection in the Nellis Creek area if you need help. So at EFM, we are familiar with Nadine. So if you need help in that area, please send us an email and we can connect you with her.
Thank you for that, Nadine. It's really helpful. We appreciate everything that you do, and you help us bring your contacts and connections in.
Okay, it looks like we don't have a lot going on, but we did have another comment come across. So as we're ready to wind down, the comments are going to keep coming in. Does anybody know if EFMP workers are still going to be working? And that has been a crazy question. So it's important to remind all of you that there are 2 types of EFMP. There's your EFMP medical side that works at the hospital, and there's your EFMP family support side. So you would assume that the director of EFMP, if they're a green suitor especially, they're probably working, right? Because they are likely a medical provider. I would not think that your packets to PCS are probably going to move very quickly. And we know that your support services, these happen in all the different places, are funded by very different mechanisms according to branch. So it's really hard to tell you whose EFMP family support is going to be open and who's not. You know that we talked about MWR. We know that some of the family support also falls under MWR. So just be prepared for things to really calm down and to not have a lot of access to those people. You have the rest of the day to get through with the things you need. So if there's something super urgent, I would be driving down and knocking on doors and saying, we need to get this taken care of just in case. We had another question come across that says, do we know how this shutdown is going to affect PCSing for an EFMP reassignment?
I will take that one. What should happen is that PCSs should be canceled, not canceled, but suspended, unless there is a specific situation that the service member is going to a location or a job that can be justified under some sort of exception. So for the vast majority of people, if you are supposed to PCS next week, I would not be eating down that refrigerator quite so fast. But there will be exceptions to this rule.
Right. And if you're specifically, Savannah, talking about a compassionate reassignment for the Army or a humanitarian for the Air Force and some of the other branches, if you're going for a medical reason, there are always exceptions to be made. And I think that that's really important. If you are struggling with this and you are supposed to be leaving and there's a true medical, like this can't wait another week or two for us to PCS, and you don't know what to do and there's a hard stop, again, please reach out to us at EFM. We will elevate that as high as we can to make sure it gets in the right hands. But we also have to be serious about this and realize that there has to be a really significant reason, right? We can't just say, oh, well, they were supposed to leave and they need to be there by now, right? Like we might be missing a couple weeks of therapy and that's okay. But if we're going because we're having a cancer treatment, that's a completely different issue. So if it's an emergency and you need to be getting there, please reach out to us at EFM and we would be happy to push it up to every person that we can to get that moving if you are stuck. So we have another one. How will the shutdown affect PCS and EFMP families with humanitarian PCSs? So I think we addressed that, Kat. If there's another question surrounding that we didn't get, please tell us again in the comments and we can clarify. And we wanted to share why we're waiting to see if Kat has a follow-on. SFI shared with us again a link, everything you need to know about a government shutdown. So we encourage everyone to go to that link, read up. Knowledge is power, especially for our families. So go learn what it really is. Get any of the other questions you may have answered on that, because sometimes I know for me, reading it makes it a lot easier to comprehend than listening to it and trying to take it all in at one time. Okay, so I think maybe this time our questions have really come to an end. Does anybody have anything in closing they'd like to share that we missed?
Not that we missed, just I want to, again, thank you so much for putting this together and for all the great questions, and for both everyone here also for sharing your information and your knowledge, because I learned something every time too. And again, like you mentioned, Austin, knowledge is power. So I hope that we continue to information share. And if I could do one last plug, to please call or write your representative and your senators today and tell them how the shutdown will impact you and your family.
Thank you so much, Kate. We really appreciate you guys being here.
Oh, there was someone wants to know where's contact information for reaching out. So
Holly K, we will drop contact information for each of the organizations in the comments in just a few minutes. I am going to toss it over to Jennifer to close us out. I really appreciate all of you joining us today. Jennifer, do you have anything else we need to get before we close?
Again, I am on mute, of course. No, just want to really reiterate, and being with EFM and being an EFMP family, just make sure you know what your resources are, so that way what you could possibly need, all of that, just in case, this goes on longer than anticipated. Either it goes down or, if hopefully everything gets worked out, but just understand, what you need to do in order to to try to stay ahead of all of this. We really appreciate everyone coming and joining us again. I know that we had a live yesterday and then we had another one, obviously, again today. But we really do appreciate everybody kind of coming together and trying to be there for all of our military families. So thank you all so much. And again, do not hesitate to reach out to any of our organizations if you have questions. Thank you.